and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 247. Here we are, live on YouTube. If you happen to be watching live, leave me a comment down below, say hello, let me know what you're up to, let me know what the weather's doing, and we can get this chat going. Yes, so today we're talking about some drag queen shoot that I did, the big event in the Dumfries calendar. So we're going to be talking all about that. So I'm going to give you bits of ideas of showing you some of the shots that I did behind the scenes, of out on stage, and give you kind of some ideas of how I approached doing a shoot, which was very different from the usual kind of thing that I do. So yes, where are we? Well, I suppose let's make a start. Yeah, so hello, and like I say, leave me a comment if you happen to be watching live. If you're not watching live, you can still leave a comment. Just let me know what you're commenting on, if you happen to be commenting on anything through the podcast, because it doesn't timestamp the comments later on. But generally speaking, YouTube does let me know, so I can kind of... I might be able to respond to you later. But as we're going, I would like your comments. If you, mostly I'm going to be kind of going through the pictures, but sort of tell me, if you have questions, if you have ideas, if you have suggestions or particular comments on any of the photos, then leave a comment and let me know. I can see we have got a couple of people in already. April says, greetings everyone from a hot and sunny Long Island, New York. And Janet says, hi from another warm day in Mississauga. Going up to 32 degrees today, feeling like 36 with humidity. Wow. John says, hello all, still hot in Ohio. Well, it seems to be hot where everybody's coming from at the moment. And certainly even today, here in Castle Douglas in southwest Scotland, not as hot as 32 degrees. I think we're maybe going up to 18 or 19 degrees C. But it is quite sunny and quite summery, which is rather nice. It's been quite wet and miserable for a while now, for a few weeks or a couple of weeks at least. So it's kind of been quite nice to see a little bit of return for the sunshine. All right, okay. So, a quick update on this Smug Points. In fact, yes, so Smug Points, I decided to do a May and June combined Smug Points. And standout winner was in fact Anne from Texas with 115 Smug Points. Robert, her husband, close second with 105. VG just pulling up behind with 100 Smug Points. April on 80 and Meg on 70. So congratulations, Anne, on the winning the Smug Points. This means you get to choose the next topic for the challenge. So send me an email, or I'll send you an email, let you know, and give you a reminder. And you can pick a topic that you would like me to cover in these podcasts and then set a challenge for. And generally speaking, with any of these things, you can either set a challenge for... picture a topic that you're already familiar with and you think you've got a good chance of winning more Smug Points with, or what is probably preferable is you set a challenge for a topic that you're maybe less familiar with and that I can give you more information about in the process. Yeah, sorry, just cleaning my glasses here because seem to have got smudged somewhere along the line. Right, so yes, congratulations, Anne. Oh, yeah, April says yay, Anne, as well. Okay, cool. So we have Smug Points winner, and for anybody who's maybe watching this back and isn't entirely sure what Smug Points are all about, so you get Smug Points to do with the amount you contribute to these podcasts. So generally speaking, just turning up live here now, leaving a comment to let me know that you're watching live, you get 5 Smug Points. So say hello, gets 5 Smug Points. There you go. Simple as that. If I set a challenge and you put an entry into one of the challenges, then you get 10 Smug Points for doing that. Then I have bonus for 30, 20 and 10 Smug Points for my favourite first, second and third place, and occasionally there's the odd 5-point bonus commended thrown in as well. But also if you send in an image for critique feedback, then you get a bonus 25 Smug Points, and you get more for that because I tend to feel that's really one of the hearts of this podcast, is the notion that this is one of those few places on the internet where you can get genuine feedback on your photography to help improve your understanding of the whole thing. The name's in the title. Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. And the whole point of these podcasts is to help you improve your understanding of photography. Now, I can only do that if you let me know what it is you would like help with. So do that, and that keeps what keeps these podcasts going. Right, okay, so where are we going to make a start? So, yeah, let me give you a little bit of background about the idea of what these what these podcasts were about in the first place. So some of you may remember a few weeks back, or a couple of months ago now, I did a podcast on Divine Tension and Madame Joe, who are a pair of drag queens, the creations of Dylan and Jordan, based in Dumfries here in southwest Scotland, which are kind of rural town, not necessarily where you would expect there to be a drag scene as such. Now, I have to say, on a personal level, drag is a whole world that I've never really had a great deal to do with. So when I met Madame Joe and subsequently Jordan chatting away, it was a kind of, there's an interest, there's a whole, why are we photographers? Part of being a photographer is a curiosity. You know, we want to be able to see photography allows us to see the world in a way that we don't usually see it. When we freeze a moment, when we zoom in on a little piece of detail in macro photography, when we arrange a still life, when we decide to photograph from here rather than here, when we decide how we're going to compose it, all these things make us look at the world in a way that we don't usually look at it. And that curiosity, that sense of discovery, that sense of exploration, I suppose, is kind of at the heart of what we do. And then that feeds out into other things as well. And certainly for me, the idea of entering a drag scene, okay, so I mean, personally, I have no desire to dress up in such a way, but does that make me any less interested? No, what I get interested in is people and people's lives and people's reactions and people's creations. And Dylan and Jordan have created characters, these drag queen characters, but more than that, they've created a whole scene in a rural town. Now, there is a bigger drag scene going up in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, and down in London, and probably most of the major cities around the world you will find them. But it's not, as I say, not something you necessarily expect in rural Scotland. But over the last few years, they've been steadily building this up. And this was their third major event called Steamin. And in essence, what's happened is they have regular events going on, but this was the biggie. This one is where they kind of invited other drag artists from around the country to come and perform. And if you're into your drag scene, then I mean, there's the locals. Then there's the next big place is Glasgow, where they have quite a few connections, and they had a few performers coming down from Glasgow. But then they also had some coming up from England as well, with a couple of bigger names. So if you watch, can't remember whether it's BBC or it's Netflix, but there's RuPaul's Drag Race. And if you're into drag, that's been going for many seasons and is a big kind of TV series, and insight into all sorts of things to do with it. And they had kind of essentially three headline acts, and two of them both appeared in RuPaul's Drag Race, and then there was another one who had come along from a slightly different route. Oh, suddenly my mind goes. But there's a Dragula, I think, was one of the things, and I can't remember whether that was the name of the program but in essence, there's a whole kind of gothic drag scene as well. Again, who knew? I didn't, but if you did, then excellent. So we get to a point where that first year, 2 years ago, they were really trying to experiment and get it going, building on the success of that. Last year's was a little bit bigger, and then this time they managed to really pull everything together and create year 3. The big one. And this was also, though, tying in with my conversations and my getting to meet and to know Dylan and Jordan, was the idea that I could be invited along to take photographs, but with an access all areas. idea. So it wasn't just a case of being out the front taking photos of people on stage, but I could be backstage, I could be side stage, I could move around in places that nobody else could. And that gave me a unique access to what was going on. So with all that, I can see Meg's joined us and says hello everyone. Yay, hey Meg, glad you could make it along. So let's make a start. I'm going to run through the photos. So like I say, well, if you ask questions, okay, leave comments, give me feedback, and let's make a start. So here we can. Here's a start. So some of the photos I did were of them on stage. So this was set in Chance's nightclub in Dumfries, and they've got a main kind of area and with a kind of stage part, but there's also a little bit of a balcony goes around the top. I managed to kind of get up onto the balcony, find a little space, squeeze down, place my camera through and take photos. So here's a little bit of fun. So we've got Madame Joe on the left, we've got Divine Tension on the right, and this is just what. So some of the photos then I went out to the front, I went up onto the balcony and took photos, and these kind of photos, so like this one, I mean here, they're performing together. We end up with essentially a sense of what the performance is like, and they're not necessarily the greatest photos that which will be sort of blown up to posters or anything like that, but they do give you a reasonable sense of what's going on. The relationship between the two of them is wonderful. They've known each other for years. They've kind of built up this whole scene together. And it starts to kind of give you a sense of what, and this is one where Madame Joe is then doing a solo performance. So they had performances together, they did solo performances. Then each of the different drag acts also had their own set of performances. And all the performers had at least 2 performances each, where they went up on stage, and then it was mixed with nightclub DJ stuff going on as well. So it was a full-on evening. Now, the part of my access then was I was able to get round to the sort of side stage coming. You see, if you look at this cloth at the behind here, so this is creating a back cloth for the stage area, but the cloth slightly to one side is where you can kind of come on stage, and I could kind of come out to there and then essentially photograph from side on, and this kind of gave me more interesting access to, and you managed to get some interesting angles, because from this angle, side on, you've got the light coming down, you've got a performer on stage, Madame Joe on stage in this case, but you've also got the audience showing up as well, and that's a kind of fun thing to do. Very often when we're taking photos or we're watching performances, everybody's got their photos sort of straight on the stage, much like these ones, But if you can kind of get to the side of the stage and you get photos of the audience as well as the performer, I think it gives you that sort of slightly more interesting. It's then not just about the performer and what they look like. You're aware about that interaction, that there's a performer and there's an audience. And for many performers, the audience is a crucial part of performing. And okay, I mean, just that point alone is worth saying, because on the one hand it can be obvious, and on the other hand it's not necessarily obvious. I think it's one of these things which is only obvious once you've really thought about it, which is the notion that when you're a performer, whether you are an actor on a stage, whether you are a drag queen, whether you are a musician, that every single performer will tell you that the mood of the audience, the sense of an audience there, profoundly affects the performance. That the performance isn't just sitting in isolation. It's not the same as, if you're playing the guitar, sitting in a room on your own playing the guitar is not the same as playing the guitar in front of other people. Even if everybody else is fairly quiet, even if the lights are fairly low and you can't see somebody much, that you pick up on the sense, the feel. You're aware that it becomes an interaction. It becomes almost a co-collaboration back and forth between the audience. The audience feeds the performer. Now, that can also go badly. I mean, when people start, do performances and you get a hostile crowd. But where it works at its best, and every performer will tell you this, is when the audience is on your side. And as a performer, part of what you're trying to do is get your audience on side. Because then to be able to be in a place where you are entertaining, practically controlling, but also getting feedback for and subtly adjusting your act to ride or drive that mood of the audience is a really powerful thing. And if you've not done any performing before, or you've only ever performed in the sense that you did a school play once and all you can remember is sort of standing on there getting stage fright, then it might not have occurred to you just how much that how important that audience interaction is. And it's almost part of why people will go and perform is precisely so you get that audience interaction. It's not just about standing, otherwise you would just stand there and do it in front of a mirror and it would make no difference to you. So to come back to here then, that I think part of what I'm trying to do, yes, I've taken some photos of performers on stage in much the same way as if I was a member of the audience. And some of the photos of the set that I'm taking because they are kind of documentary as such. They're just sort of documenting the fact that these people were performing there. And I'm trying to create interesting photos of that. But when I get this idea of the performer with the audience, that makes a difference. That kind of creates a different feel to the photo, and it allows me as a photographer trying to tell a story. I start hunting out what story am I trying to tell. And in a story like this, you've partly got Madame Jo up here, and at the same time I'm looking for line and light. You know, I've taken a lot of photos, probably took the best part of 1,000 photos that night. Obviously then I'm narrowing it down to maybe a few dozen of which I want to actually use. So I'm picking out the best ones. And then in here we've got a nice line and form, and then the hand coming down. But we've also got the people in the front row. We've got the people looking back. So that notion of an interaction becomes much clearer. And that's part of what I'm looking for as a storyteller with my photography. With this one, another version of Madame Jo, where actually I've gone up onto the balcony, but I'm at sort of behind and to the side with the balcony. So again, this was actually an area of the balcony which was only accessible by those who had the behind the scenes access. And this is a kind of fun angle because actually nobody else, other than one or two of the other performers who came along to sort of just watch, had this access. Nobody in the crowd, nobody who sort of bought a ticket, was able to shoot from this angle. And here we're again get interesting lines, but again there's a large part of it. This is about the crowd as well. This one was a fun one. I really quite liked it. I kind of ended up giving this one a slightly more cinematic crop because it just sort of felt it lent itself to it. And this is where not only am I at the side, but I can get slightly back. I'm sort of moving back into that sort of entrance level. So now we're really kind of getting the crowd behind, but we've also got the lights coming down and different lights are kind of coming on and moving about. And here we have that beautiful kind of orange-blue split in the colouring. And also because there's bits of smoke, dry ice and what have you in the air, we're getting the particles. Remember I've talked before about the notion of backlight. Backlight is the photographer's secret weapon. And when you can get backlight and you can get and smoke particles as well, the light dissipates in a slightly different way and kind of moves around the image, and it becomes kind of way more interesting, I think, very atmospheric. This one taken later, this is also, I mean, this is Divine Tension. This is Divine Tension again later on wearing a different outfit. And here again, we've got the light, we've got the smoke, and I'm looking for line. And I also, the great thing about the smoke, at this point, is that the shadows kind of create these shafts of light as well. So it isn't just about a case of documenting. I'm not just photographing who happens to be there. I'm trying to look for that notion of line, light, form. What makes an interesting photo? Does it, and I quite like this. I think this one works quite well as as a standalone photo because you look at it and you start kind of building the story around it. This one was Choriza May. And this is one where she is stepping onto the stage. Now, just as a wee point for finding your pronouns, generally speaking, if I'm talking about so a drag queen, man dressed up as a woman, or in feminine dresses and all this kind of stuff, if I'm talking about the individual person behind it, so like Dylan and Jordan, that's he. If I'm talking about that character, Madam Joe and Divine, then she. And so here we are with, so most of these I'm going to refer to as she. And I'm fairly certain that's the way you do your pronouns. However, I am open to being corrected if you know differently. In the end, I am a 50-year-old white male, cis, I don't know. I'm open to mistakes here, but I am also open to being corrected. So this is a kind of stepping onto the stage bit. Here's another one where she is owning the stage, and you can see, you know, calling the audience on. There's another thing here which I noticed a lot, and you will see in quite a few of the photos, is there's a lot of everybody's holding their phone up, recording the experience. You know, here's a phone, here's a phone, here's a phone, here's a phone. Yeah, a lot of people were doing that. I think these days it's now become essentially part of almost any event, is that everybody starts filming it on their phones. Now this one, she's called Fair Verona, and this is this is now just sort of behind the curtain. The light is coming through, and she's just about to step on stage. And something about this photo I really love. There's a sort of stillness in her expression, and as she's just preparing to get on, I've just turned the camera, managed to capture that. I also love the way the light is kind of coming through that back curtain bit, and sort of that sort of shimmery, slightly other world in the shade, but just starting to emerge from the shade as well. So that's yeah, this is one of those photos that I particularly like of Fair Verona as well. Oh, I see VG's joined us from India, says, hello, good evening from Chennai. Hi, VG, glad you could make it. Busy running through the photos that I took of the show. So here's another one of Fair Verona, only this time now, again, a side on and isolated from the audience. This I think was a second performance, because you can see got a different outfit to the last one. But again, I'm trying to look for that notion of line and angles, and you know, the way the arm comes down, the microphone comes up, where your eye gets drawn to. So always in these situations, it is kind of live performance photography is a bit of a madhouse, really. You have no control over the lighting, you have no control over the subject, you have a sense of movement, what's going on. You can't suddenly go, oh, that's a lovely line, can you just hold that, you know, or repeat that. You can't interfere at all. So you are shooting, well, I was going to say blind, but no, shooting unaware, with no control over the situation. But that can also be quite exciting. It does mean that you get there's a big miss rate, a lower hit rate than usual, because by the time you see something interesting, chances are it's gone. By the time you've actually lined up your camera and gone click, it's disappeared. So you have to start to learn to anticipate, or you have to shoot quite a few more photos than you're going to need. Here's one again, another audience interaction, and this was quite a fun one where, you know, and again, different kinds of performers. Interesting. There were some performers were like Fair Verona here was one who was singing, like, so there's music in the background, but she's singing with her own voice. There were others who would lip sync, but it was actually more about, but then dance and move and generate this kind of whole energy around the performance in that way. Some of them are very much talking and then interacting with the audience. So Fair Verona, she was doing singing, but also audience interaction as well. And then some were doing more performance pieces, just kind of embodied, not embodied, contained, that's the word I'm looking for, sort of contained performance pieces. And I'm going to show you some of those as well. So this was Eve Divine, and Eve Divine was one of these who had an energy leaping about the stage, jumping around. And at one point, like on this one, for example, where she just dives, charges into the crowd, kind of parting the crowd to sort of move into, come off the stage, and then whoever's in charge of the spotlight, they've got to somehow try and follow her around as well. And it's almost a kind of, a bit like they talk about with performances where they break the fourth wall, which is where you have actors, whether it's on stage or on TV or cinema, where they're all talking to each other and you're watching, and then suddenly they turn to the camera. And you're not expecting that, because that's not what it's. If it's a film or it's a theatre piece, you don't, generally speaking, get the actors talking to the audience. So that's known as breaking the fourth wall. There's a similar kind of thing, I think, sometimes with certain performers, where instead of staying on the stage, they kind of move and dive into the audience, and it creates a whole new level of energy and interaction. Really changes the mood of a performance. This one here is page 3. Came on, got a coat, then the coat comes off, and she started, very gymnastic, athletic, huge amounts of kind of leaping around the stage, performances, doing the splits, very, very high energy. With this one, what I tried to capture, I can't remember what my, do I have a, no, I can't remember what my camera settings were with this one. The problem is, as well, is that because you're in relatively low light, you tend to have to, you don't want to go too high with the shutter speed, because you're fighting ISO. This is one of the things about shooting in a nightclub, is you're fighting high ISO all the time because it's low light. But at the same time, every now and again, you can kind of hit something in the spotlight, which is then really over bright and everything whites out. So it's the challenge, as well as not having any sense of being able to tell a performer, oh look, hold that there, or can you pose this? Your lighting is changing all the time as well. So yeah, it's it's fun. It absolutely stretches you to the limit of well, beyond the limit of what you're capable of, to be honest. There's a level whereby you are constantly chasing, constantly fighting, constantly desperately trying to get the right photos, and every now and again you get one that works and you heave a sigh of relief, or you feel quite excited. But obviously the more you do it, the more you start to build a sense of anticipation. You start to learn when you can use what camera settings to use, when to go for the wide aperture, when to go for the fast shutter speed, when you can maybe slow the shutter speed back down again. This is one where the Paige's second performance, where she moves into the audience, much like Eve Divine did. At this point, I'm actually back up on the balcony, looking down, and at that point as well, you start audience reaction. You start to see some of the faces and expressions that, this person obviously laughing with this friend, this one obviously eyeing her up. So, you've got kind of fun interests, which is not just about the performer, it's about that audience reaction. Oh, we have somebody called Sam who's joined us. Hi Sam, glad you could. Sam says Danny La Rue would be spinning in his grave at how drag has become such a vulgar spectacle of bad taste and poor divine impersonators. Ooh, that's harsh. Well, okay, there's an interesting one. I'm not going to shy away from a challenge. I'm not, as I say, drag isn't my scene. I was watching. What I was watching was performers. What I was watching was people having fun. And there are all sorts of different ways of having fun. And just like if you consider the idea of music, that we all have different tastes. Some people, it's got to be rock and roll. Some people, it's got to be pop. Some people, it's got to be country. Some people, it's got to be rap or house or grime or classical, or not just classical, but how many different kinds of classical are there, whether it's Baroque or it's romantic or, there's a level of taste, there's a level of playfulness, there's a level of there's the what you appreciate, and then there's the what somebody else might appreciate. And maybe you have no idea why somebody, there's all sorts of stuff on TV which I turn on the schedules and I have no idea why anybody would possibly want to watch it. And yet millions of people do. So for example, I'm not into soap operas, right? EastEnders does nothing for me. Coronation Street, don't want to bother watching it, right? Didn't enjoy Dallas, didn't enjoy, you know, any kind of, they don't, soap operas don't do it for me. And yet they are one of the biggest watched genres of programme out there. So, is everybody else wrong? Is it just a matter of taste? I will go with the idea it's a matter of taste. That there are always going to be some things that I enjoy that you won't, that you'll enjoy that I won't. Does it mean one of us is wrong? No, it just means that's what we're into. So I think if you've got a particular love for the Danny La Rue style drag, then that's great. That's not problematic. This is a different kind of drag. This is just, but this is also club performance. You know, this isn't movie, this isn't prime time TV. This is people who've taken it and grown it, and it's moved in a particular direction. And there's all sorts of directions that it's gone in. So, no, I mean, yeah, fine, Sam. You know, I think if you've got a particular taste for a particular kind of drag, then that's okay. That's fine. When I was there photographing these people, what I can tell you is everybody was having a huge amount of fun with it. The performers were having fun and the audience was having a lot of fun. And what I was trying to do as a photographer was capture the sense of mood, story, drama, fun, but also behind the scenes as well, which is some of the photos I'll be coming on to soon. But, you know, I appreciate your input here because it allows us to kind of have this discussion. Thank you. This one, so this was Success SXSS, SZ, sorry. So now Success was, had a couple of different things where she was less certain about the pronouns with this one. Moving, in this case, a cloth, had another one where cloth with lights on. And what I was, so these photos, then these next couple of photos I'm going to show you, I took from out front. And from out front, so I'm up on the balcony bit, and there's I was trying to describe the balcony. It doesn't really matter, but there was a point whereby essentially I could rest the camera and use a little kind of ridge in the balcony to be able to rest the camera and sort of use as a semi-tripod. And what that allowed me to do was to go for a slower shutter speed. So up until now, everything has been fast shutter speed, to try and get, or at least 160th to 200th of a second to try and capture what's going on. But what I thought here would be interesting with the movement was to drop the shutter speed down. And then so by dropping it down to something like 1/5 of a second or even 1/2 a second, at this point the bright yellow of Success really stood out, and the cloth that's being used really then spreads out, and you get such a beautiful sense of movement. And I'm able to hold the camera's able to stay steady enough such that the background is still in, you know, relatively sharp focus. We can start to see where people have moved here. It's getting a little bit out of focus here, but that doesn't matter. There's enough of the background in focus to know that so we're getting that beautiful sense of movement that's going on. Oh, VG says, movement captured beautifully, the one in yellow dressed like a banana peel. And here's another one, which at this point then, you know, there's extra colours kind of coming in, with splashes of red. And it gets really quite abstract at this point. And yeah, it's fun. I really quite like this one. This is where, as a photographer, you're playing around with your shutter speed. How can I kind of create, what can I create that's interesting? And most of the time we have a higher shutter speed so we can freeze the performance so they don't just look like they're a little bit out of focus. But in this case, we're really allowing, because there's such grand movements of the cloth that's kind of moving around, then it actually is far more effective to show that sense of movement by allowing that longer shutter speed. Oh, Meg says, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I was quite pleased with it. This one was Scarlet Harlot. So one of the headliner performers like Theresa May, and Scarlet Harlot was very much a kind of talking interaction with the audience, And as you can see here, it's, you know, I always find it interesting where you can get somebody else's mobile phone, where it's picture within a picture. Remember we were talking about, we did a challenge on the notion of picture within a picture. So I'm seeing Scarlet Harlot from this angle, but we can also see the picture inside this phone here, the angle that she's getting of her. This one here, working out, getting his camera ready. This one you can see she's holding her camera right up as well, or phone. And it's funny because actually they're not looking, you know, when you think about it, these three people here who've all got their phones out, none of them are actually looking at the performer. They're only looking at the performer through their phone rather than directly at the performer. This one here is looking directly at the performer, but then she doesn't have her phone out. So there's, you know, I think that's the notion of finding stories within stories is interesting too. This one again, going for the moving behind, you know, back up again, so we get the light coming through. I think it always is that, again, you know, backlight gives us, you know, backlight, secret weapon of photographers. We've said it before, we'll say it many times again. Well, when you get the light behind, and especially when you've got that kind of smoky, if you've got particles in the air, it makes everything pop, and it really gives it that much more kind of magical feel. John says, I can well imagine the lighting must have been a challenge, but it looks like you managed it very well. Yeah, thanks, John. But yes, it was. It is kind of what I was saying, is the fact that the lighting is constantly changing, especially when you've got a spotlight that's moving around. And as you move around, suddenly sometimes the spotlight kind of right in your camera, half blinding you, and everything gets completely blown out. Trying to get the balance right is particularly difficult. And I have to say that it helps having a modern camera. You know, a lot of times, you know, we can have a camera. I know plenty of people are more than happy with their 10 or 15-year-old Nikon, still shoots well, and maybe it does still shoot well. Certainly in scenes where you're not having to worry about low light. So things like, you know, landscapes and wildlife photography, unless it's nighttime wildlife photography, but a lot of stuff, yeah, older cameras will perform just as well. But I will say that a camera that's less than 2 or 3 years old, generally speaking, more modern cameras work much better in lower light situations. And oddly enough, actually out on stage, out the front of stage, I sometimes think your phone will do a better job for capturing that mixed level of light. Certainly for web level photos. Probably I mean, a little tangent for a moment, but still worth talking about. So the notion of your phone, your camera phone, your phone camera. Because what these things, the technology is designed for people who aren't going to be adjusting their aperture or their shutter speed or their ISO. It's doing it all for you. And what it generally does is it takes several photos and brackets them basically instantaneously, then uses all these algorithms to mix them all together, put it together so that it draws all the details out of the shadows, draws all the details out of the highlights, gives you this amazingly balanced photo, better than actually what your eye can see most of the time as well. And all you've got to do is point it and press the screen and hope, and it will even focus in the right place 9 times out of 10 for you. Now, the quality won't be there if you want to blow it up big and make a poster out of it. Most of the photos that I've taken that I'm showing you, if you want to make posters, you can. I've got a high resolution camera. But 99% or more of photography these days is consumed online. It's consumed by looking back at it on the phone, sharing it on social media where it's looked at on the phone or a tablet. Very rarely are you even looking at it as big as a desktop screen. And at that point, these things are just delivering at an astonishing level. And there were other photos. I was looking in the back of people's phones thinking, they're getting better photos than I am with my camera, especially out from front of stage. So sometimes, use the technology, understand what your camera is good for. Now, what my camera was good for, and what I was good for, was being able to get backstage. It was partly about my access to, and also because I'm a photographer, because I've been training my eye for composition and light. It's not just a case of I randomly get a nice photo. I know how to line these photos up. So when we flick back to here, I'm kind of composing with this sense of, we have here Scarlett Hart, and she's sitting rule of thirds, and we've got the light on the right half, and we've got the light sort of spreading across the audience over to the left here, and then it sort of disappears out. So there's a much more of there's an artistic sense to this, which to be honest, I probably could have, because of where I come from, I could have got something similar with my phone as well. But then it wouldn't have been printable, whereas this is. John says, you have helped me justify upgrading to mirrorless in the past year or so. Yep, absolutely. Justification. You need, yep, if you needed it, it is for lower light photography. This one was, what was her name? Bear with me one sec. Yes, Sir. SYR. Call me Sir. So Sir was one of these who was very much a performer with it, where they create a character and then create this whole little kind of 5-10 minute vignette performance, and it's very theatrical, and it's so there's not just music but soundtrack going on in the background, and it's all about moving body, creating costume, and it's a different thing. It's not singing and dancing, and it's not interaction with the audience and cracking jokes. This is a very different kind of performance, and this is what I must admit, that one of the real fun things of watching all this was the vast array of different ways people would create. I mean, it's cabaret, really. It's cabaret. I think that's the word I should have used right at the beginning. All these different kind of performers come on and do all sorts of different things. And Sir was dressing up in elaborate costumes with elaborate wigs, and then it was really a case of trying to capture some of these sort of sense of movement of, again, using line, trying to find expression, stories, that kind of thing. I mean, you know, really emoting. And so again, I'm trying to capture that point whereby you're getting that strong expression of emotion, that kind of, at this point, kind of an outpouring, crying out of kind of thing going on. A lot of fun. Then we're into, this was Anaphylactic, who comes from the kind of gothic drag queen background, and quite amazing. She had like 3 different outfits in the time that I saw her, and this one, and so painted in kind of black and white, face painting done in black and white, and so essentially she becomes like almost like the kind of Bride of Frankenstein, or the kind of 1930s, 1940s horror film ideas is kind of all the influences. So if this was shot in black and white, she'd look exactly the same. But then that becomes kind of interesting when you've got the colour around her as well. Where are we? You know, another one from the side stage, managing to get that wonderful light coming down from the front and kind of creating this kind of edge light going on. And again, performers, people who really know how to move their body and kind of stretch and create shape. Lots of fun. This was another one of her characters a bit later on, which is sort of gothic sci-fi in a way. And again, we've got fantastic expressions. It's very much this kind of actor's performance, actory performance, and again, people in the front row watching it through their phones. Now, this one, the last couple of photos I want to show you from the kind of performance side of it was taken through that back cloth. Remember, so you've got that back cloth, and it's sort of semi-see-through. Now, when the light's coming at it from the front, it's just the back cloth. But if you're standing behind it with all the light coming through, then it starts dissipating the light. If you look at the way you're getting the kind of starburst stuff. And so here, interestingly, we've got picture of Divine, but taken through the back cloth as well, and it creates this very kind of dreamy, hazy kind of feel. to it, which is fun. And if we take this one here, so Scarlet Harlot, and where that orange light, which we saw earlier, is now coming through, and just this massive starburst, and then with the backlight edge light rim around here, stars on the ceiling. I mean, it's A Star Is Born. It's a kind of glorious cinematic theatrical kind of feel to it. It's out of focus in that sense of nothing is sharp, and it can't be sharp because there's this black cloth between the camera and everything that's going on. And yet the atmosphere of it kind of fair took my breath away. When I was playing around, just thinking, okay, I can see movements through the other side of the camera, let's take the photo, and occasionally pushing my camera right up against the cloth, taking the photos. In the back of the camera it looked a bit interesting, but I couldn't really tell until I got home and was looking at these on the screen. And initially I wasn't sure whether they would have just been duds, too out of focus to be worth using, but actually some of these are just, this just feels like it's all atmosphere. This was up in the DJ booth, so DJ Kiki, I think Willow here actually on the thing, and Madam Joe over on the right here checking out bits and pieces before going on. This is another one, that orange light again. As it swings round, I managed to get this photo of Willow with backlight, and again we've got those wonderful colour combinations, that blue, yellow, blue, orange kind of combination, which works so well. And so the blue of the mixing console, but this orange light coming up and then creating backlight, edge, rim, catching the hair, reflecting off a little bit of surface down here. And this is one of those where I just went, oh god, you know, there's bits where every now and again you just get really lucky, and just because the orange light happened to be swinging past, and it happened to get at the point I went click, it was in just the right place to create this beautiful effect. So let's move on then to another set. So it wasn't just about being down on the stage, there was the notion of behind the scenes as well. Behind the scenes, here we've got Scarlet Harlot sticking the makeup on. Now, I got a couple of black. Here I went black and white because, to be honest, the light itself wasn't particularly great. The room they're in, there's an overhead strip light. It's not really giving us much to play with. And I realised when I put it into black and white, it felt much more atmospheric. You know, because now it's more about, you know, change of tone and stuff. We're not having to worry about the colour washing out in the way that it does in an overhead strip light. So the next few photos I'm going to show you are in black and white, and also the other thing with black and white is we know that it kind of has that slightly more documentary storytelling vibe to it. So here's another one, Scarlet Harlot, a bit further on in the makeup, slightly different angle. I really like the fact that she's got the light around the mirror, and you can see it reflecting in the eyes as well. And it does have kind of quite a bit of a mood and an atmosphere to it. This one, Theresa May, and again you can see lights here around, another light clipped to the top up here. In fact, actually you can't see that because that's let me just kind of drag this down over here. You can then see that there's this light here which is then clipped to the top of the mirror. So different lights kind of coming in. This one here, anaphylactic, sitting in front of the light, mirrors. You can see a light here reflecting in the mirror, coming from over to this. Is it the light? No, it isn't the light. That's the window. I think there's a sort of bit of window coming in here. Yes, that's right. This window had that kind of glass which is mottled, and so you can't actually look through the window as such. Light comes in, but it does. But it also kind of dulls the light slightly as well. A little bit later, page 3 has come on. So a lot of lights being lost, but she's got this fold-out mirror and then a light built into here. Either that or it's a phone, but I think it's a light that's clipped on. You can see the light kind of coming up. And again, these kind of fun shots to get, where you're sort of getting people applying their makeup. You're really feeling behind the scenes. So there's essentially their green room. There's a room up above the main part of the nightclub, where all the performers were allowed to kind of go back, have a drink, relax between performances, chat, sort their makeup out, sort out their dresses, all this kind of stuff. But I was given the access to this, and then sometimes you get a bit of a fun shot here, where so instead of focusing on Paige like I am here, Paige goes out of focus, and the focus goes on to Divine, who's having a wee can of Wicked. I think Wicked Blue, Wicked Orange. I'm not entirely sure. It's not in colour. Other kinds of behind the scenes shots though. Just where you've kind of got everybody sitting around. There's very much a kind of documentary sense, but you look at it and you just realise, okay, this isn't my everyday kind of shoot. This is my everyday kind of experience. We've got people here dressed to different degrees, and yeah, so this then is giving us a sense of just the people sitting around, relaxing, chatting. Over on the doors here go to the stairwell, which then take you down to the performance area. We've got a list of performances, what order they go in, where the DJ breaks are, where people are expected in. So everybody's kind of, and then there's somebody kind of coming up and down the stairs, kind of to make sure that give people essentially that curtain call for when they're ready. Playing around, having fun, snacking on bits of pizza. I mean, these are all kind of just that kind of sense of behind the scenes. Here we've got Madam Jo helping Divine with her nails, in fact, and a couple of photos of this one. I really like. I like the way that Madam Jo is looking at Divine Tension. This one, this is the one that I use for the cover card for this podcast. Every time I look at it, it just grabs me every time. There's something about the look, the shape, the makeup on Divine's face, and then the way Jordan is quite intimately, just helping with the nails. It's a kind of almost like a tender moment in something which is, two blokes with makeup on, and if you're not used to this scene, I think it sort of kind of grabs you and sort of plays with your head a little bit as you kind of you start creating the stories and reassessing what your thoughts are, where you're. I suppose it's really about this notion of, where your default mind goes to, and we operate our story level. Our stories are based on previous stories, and then we impose them into new places, and then when our old stories don't fit properly, we have to create new ones. And that's part of what the fun of doing this shoot has been all about, is stepping into a world which isn't a world that's familiar to me. I'm familiar with the world of performances as in musicians. I'm a musician myself. I've played on stage. I've also done a lot of photography of musicians and doing behind the scenes. But this world, totally different world, and it didn't. My existing experience didn't transfer directly onto it. It's a different kind of world. So yeah, the fun of that. Then we moved out onto the stairwell, and it started. I wasn't necessarily thinking of doing a bunch of portraits, but Theresa May just sort of grabbed me and said, "Right, I need some photos. Come and take some portraits of me." And before I know what's happening, I'm being dragged out onto the stairwell. But actually what I noticed was there was something about the stairwell that I tried a couple of different angles, but what I found was if I went down the stairs a bit and then looked up, the wall, the banister seemed to create a kind of a natural place for drawing the eye to. And then Theresa May is just one of these she knows how to use the body, create lines, create expression, moves the body around. And what have you. Here was one a bit later on. Now, so this stairs here, if we look over on the right here, that's where the previous photo was taken, at the top of the stairs. And if you see this window over on the left, that window was actually, at the point that I took this photo, that window behind, it was still daylight, and there was daylight hitting the building opposite and throwing light back in. So I was able to do much more than the natural light. This one, however, is just the overhead, the strip light, the kind of lights in the stairwell. And there's very much a kind of grunge feel. Apart from the graffiti, you know, we've got the wires hanging down from the brick, you know, exposed brickwork and what have you. So, you know, interesting kind of place to do the shoot as well. Back to earlier in the evening when we still got that light coming through. Fair Verona, another one who knew how to move her body, how to create shape. And it does have to be said, not everybody did. There's different kinds of performers, and some performers are very body aware. Some performers are very audience aware. Some performers are very kind of create their performance they're aware of the performance, but it's not necessarily about how they're looking in terms of shape and line. It's how they're looking in terms of character. Sometimes these two things overlap and sometimes they don't. So when I'm taking photographs of people, I don't have time at this point to start directing people. It's up to them. But Fair Verona was one of these who's kind of got quite an all-round package. She does know how to kind of create the shapes out of her body. She was able to sing, and she was also able to interact with the audience as well. Again, this one here gives you just this sort of classic shape and pose and what have you as well. Oh, April's legging it. That's fine, April. I know you always kind of have a tight time schedule. This one, Sir, again, showed you earlier. Again, at the top of the stairs, just immediately went into a character, immediately started kind of taking up these sort of shapes around. This one, we're going back to Anaphylactic, one of the other outfits. The first outfit I saw her in, and she's now kind of just really creating this performance to the camera, you know, creating arms up and down, facial expression. And to be honest, it's a dream when you're a photographer and that somebody actually, you know, will play to the camera in this way, whereas others will sort of stand there awkwardly and wait for you to direct. And that's fine if you've got very clear ideas of how you want to direct, but in this case I'm out of my depth completely. I've got no idea what is supposed to look or whatever. So when they take control and they take that character and then they express that character, it's then up to me to try and capture that rather than direct what it is they ought to be doing. Interestingly as well, when you go, instead of most of the ones I was doing for portrait, every now and again I do landscape, and with a landscape shot you then becomes much more aware of like the banister coming up and drawing your line. You're creating these lines taking you up towards the character at the top of the stairs. This was a quick caught one of Divine going down the stairs, which I took a couple of quick photos as she was going down. Wasn't sure whether it would come out, but this stair light here bouncing off a bit of red wall, this is like nearly a floor down from where we were. Going down, we're heading down to the stage, I'm heading down to the backstage, and I'm kind of taking it as just a shot as she's kind of going down before. And again, it's something, it creates this light here is kind of creating this backlight edging, but we've also got the reflection of the reds coming around and the red in her hat and what have you. So yeah, something kind of a bit atmospheric about that one that I liked. Flicking back a bit earlier, so here are our three headline acts, the big names from the drag scene coming up to Dumfries. So with Theresa May, Anaphylactic and Scarlet Harlot, and they wanted a shot of the three of them up on the stairs. I did a handful of other group shots. Yeah, so this one again going cinematic with this one. I've given a much more cinematic crop. Has quite a different feel with it, I think, even though the poses aren't that different. The shape's fairly similar. With this, it's all quite contained into the picture. With this one, we're just getting this kind of spread, and now it does have this kind of cinematic look. You're kind of feeling like, well, okay, maybe this is something you'd watch on Netflix. Another version of, you know, a group of them put together, and again, I suppose, you know, fair play here. Theresa May is the one who's creating shapes first and foremost, and then everybody's kind of moving around that. But we do get this kind of like nice V coming down with the upper banister coming down and joining pretty much at the foot and going back up here. So we've got a V that way, but we've also got the lines coming up from the banisters as well to kind of create these shapes going the other way. And this is really what you're on about, or what you're trying to do as a photographer. We've got this space, we've got these people. How can I create interesting lines and shapes? What can I look for? And there's maybe bits where I say, well, okay, you lean in a bit or stretch out a bit, or just let them move around and take various photos. But you're looking to create line, shape, form, make it that little bit more interesting than just everybody sort of standing there looking slightly awkward. And this was a final group shot. I was asked to take a group shot of, these are the essentially the shot of the people involved in making it happen, who weren't the three headline acts. And I was just asked right at the end, just as I was about to pack up, oh, could you just get a shot of us all sit on the stairs? So I went, yeah, fine. Came out, took the shot. Now, this is one of those where, to my own embarrassment, I only realised afterwards that because I've been working at this point, this is the end of the evening, I've got my camera on an aperture of 2.8, just trying to get as much light in as I can. I forgot to adjust it. What that means is when we go up to the top part here, this is where it focused, and as we came down, the two people in the front were completely out of focus. Now, when you're pulled back far enough, if you're only looking at this on a small phone screen, you don't notice. But this certainly isn't one you could blow up to a poster. It's even on my kind of large desktop screen, it's starting to make itself felt. So, we can still make those mistakes. I was kind of caught slightly off guard because I wasn't expecting to, and I didn't think about making the adjustments because I'd had my camera on either a 3.2 or a 2.8 all evening long. So, anyway, there we go. Not that. Yes. In fact, at this point, I think maybe I could do that. So yeah, though that hopefully then gives you this sense of, quite different, but nobody sent me in any images for feedback or critique, and it's not a challenge. But I think, periodically I will do these, showing you these photos, because I think as photographers, certainly I know I'm absolutely fascinated watching how somebody else has taken a shoot, and hopefully I've given you some insights into the way I approached it, as well as the photos, but what I was hunting for with the photos. Some of those photos out on stage from the front were more about documenting. Then the photos from the side, I'm hunting out stories. What are the lights? What's the light? What's the shape? What's the audience interaction? Looking for the photos backstage. Are we creating interesting ones where you're just watching somebody putting on their makeup, transforming from one person into a creative persona? Are we looking for just interaction of people sitting around, having a chat, being sociable? Are we trying to create some interesting portraits in a stairwell? So when I went to Chance's nightclub, I'd never been to Chance's nightclub before. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what the layout was going to be. I had no clues. It really was just going in with me and my camera and all my experience to date. And then from that, gaining a whole new load of experience, which I will then carry through in subsequent shoots. And that's what we do. We go in, we do our best. We bring in as much knowledge as we can, and we learn new as we go. And that's what keeps photography interesting, constantly creating something new. So I hope you found that interesting. So meanwhile, yeah, if you find it interesting, entertaining, you would like to support these podcasts, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. And of course, don't forget to invite your friends as well. So next week, now a little bit's going to depend on Anne and Robert haven't turned up to this one, at least the live version. So at some point I'll need to contact Anne and see, having won the Smug Points, we'll see whether she comes up with a theme for the next challenge. Now, if she gets back to me either later this evening or maybe tomorrow, then I'll work with that theme. If there's a delay or she needs some time to think about it, then what I'll do next week is I'll do a feedback session. In which case, if you want to get photos, there will either be a feedback session for next Sunday or the Sunday after. Either way, if you would like to stick your image in, you can either put it in the Flickr group, so flickr.com/UPwKA /groups/UPwKA, or the Facebook group, also /groups/UPwKA, or email me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. Send me your image. Tell me what your sticking points are, what kind of feedback you would like, and I will do my best to help you. So at some point I will have, either next week or the week after, I will have space for up to 4 images to give feedback on. So make sure you send me the images. It really is the best way to advance your photography, is to get personal feedback from a professional photographer who's on your side. Right, okay, I think that pretty much brings us to a close. Thank you for being here, thank you for the questions, thank you for the comments, thank you for just being here, really, watching. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care, bye.